Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. It's good to be with you here on this Monday morning, April 27th. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Got a partially cloudy sky, a Falcon 9 rocket or Falcon Heavy rocket. Take a minute to get used to that again. It's been over a year and a half since we've seen the launch of a SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket. It's also been a while since we've seen a launch from Pad 39A for SpaceX, since the company has been focusing primarily on preparing this pad for, as you can see, Falcon Heavy rockets, but also the launch of their upcoming Starship vehicle from Pad 39A. We've got views from around Brevard County for you today, looking at the pad from Merritt Island. You can see the true distance looking from the south to the north of the Falcon 9/Falcon Heavy pad at Launch Complex 39A, which is a little bit more to the east compared to the Starship Tower closer to the shoreline. This view coming from our Adam Bernstein down on Merritt Island today. As mentioned, we've got cameras all over the place, so looking forward to bringing you some stellar views of the Falcon Heavy rocket, assuming a good liftoff during the roughly 85-minute launch window, which is set to open at 10:21 a.m. Eastern this morning, 14:21 UTC for those joining around the world. This, of course, is not the only launch that we are tracking today from Florida Space Coast. There's also a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket that has since made its way out to the launch pad this morning, rolling out from the vertical integration facility and arriving at the pad at Space Launch Complex 41. That mission set to carry a batch of 29 of the Amazon LEO satellites on behalf of the Amazon subsidiary, Amazon LEO. We'll, of course, talk much more about that mission as we get into dedicated coverage tonight, so we hope you're able to join us back in time for that. Got a good little gap between these two missions, so time to rest and rejuvenate, and we hope you're able to join us again for the launch of the Atlas V rocket with a window that opens up at 8:52 p.m. Eastern, 00:52 UTC. Bringing things back here to Pad 39A, though, with the upcoming launch of the Falcon Heavy rocket. For those who may recall, SpaceX has typically conducted a static fire test of the Falcon Heavy before integrating the payload on board. SpaceX decided to forego a static fire test for this vehicle today, so hopefully that all pans out well for them. Again, it was back in October of 2024 the last time we saw a Falcon Heavy rocket take to the skies, and that was in support of the launch of the Europa Clipper mission for NASA. That was a fully expendable version of the Falcon Heavy rocket. This one is in, let's call it, a partially reusable configuration. SpaceX does not intend to try to recover the center core of the three Falcon boosters that make up the Heavy, but the two side boosters, tail numbers B1075 and B1072, those are respectively launching for a second for B1072 and a 22nd time for B1075. Those boosters are set to target landings, one at landing zone 2, as we've seen before with other Falcon Heavy missions. The other, for the first time in a Falcon Heavy launch, going to be landing at landing zone 40, adjacent to, as you might have guessed, Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Currently T-minus 1 hour, 55 minutes, 5 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of this Falcon Heavy rocket. and we've got the full team mobilized today in support of this mission. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Quite a dynamic one, so bear with us if we need to pause and pivot to make some things happen. There's a lot going on behind the scenes to make sure that this broadcast runs smoothly from your perspective. Our photographer is also scattered about. As mentioned, Adam Bernstein is down on Merritt Island for us. John Pisani here at the press site, as I believe Michael Caine is as well. If you're not following the fellas on X, you can find them at their handles you see here on the screen. Adam is at Aburn NYC, John is at John Pisani Photo, and Michael is at MD Caine Jr. While you're there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. We are also on Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook for those of you who are not on X. We'll also be joined throughout the course of the broadcast by our friends Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Taking a look at our live chat here this morning, want to thank the more than 880 of you watching along with us live at this early part of the broadcast. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live Falcon Heavy launch coverage. Also want to thank our moderators for being with us this morning, to Jeff Hansen and M. Teresa. Good morning to you both. Thanks for hanging out in the chat. And you can help make the moderator's job that much easier just by following our live chat rules. We ask that you please post your message in English so that our mods can respond as appropriate. We would also ask that you hold off from delving into topics of overt politics or religion, and please do not type in all caps. Emojis are perfectly fine. We just ask that you don't create a huge block of them so it takes up a large percentage of the live chat space. And last but certainly not least, we ask that you would treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated, and we'll all get along swimmingly. I also want to be sure to thank our channel members here on YouTube who help to make this and every other live launch opportunity here on YouTube possible. So big thanks to folks like Debbie Lane, as well as, let's see what else we've got this morning. Super Tech Boy is with us today. Marco Chinari, Norman Reitzel. Good to see you, Norm. Let's see, still early. Mark P is with us. U.S. Army wife and many, many others. Folks still coming on in as we get the stream started here. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and, of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. That, of course, includes the Falcon Heavy launch, hopefully lifting off here in about an hour and 15 minutes time, as well as the upcoming Atlas 5 launch, set to fly this evening. We'll have live coverage of the Atlas beginning about an hour prior to liftoff. As I mentioned, the rocket rolled out this morning, and unlike previous Atlas V rockets, the countdown has already begun for the launch of the Atlas or the Amazon Leo 6 mission from ULA. Part of their process of shrinking their timeline and the amount of time that their rocket needs to be at the pad prior to liftoff. Again, we'll talk much more about Atlas as we get on into that dedicated coverage. One other thing to note, though, as we're early in the day, in between the launch of the Falcon Heavy and the Atlas V tonight, we are expecting the arrival of NASA's Pegasus barge, which should be coming into the Turn Basin here at the press site later on this morning. It's got a very important payload on board, about 4/5 of the Space Launch System rocket core stage for the Artemis 3 mission. It left the Michoud Assembly Facility, or the MAF, down in Louisiana last week and has been slowly making its way out here to Florida. Part of the process of bringing together the hardware for the Artemis 3 mission, which is aiming to launch in the middle of 2027. Still a lot of questions about what exactly Artemis 3 will look like, whether it's a mission that will remain in low Earth orbit or if it will go into a high Earth orbit like we saw briefly with the Artemis 2 mission. Two very important questions concerning the commercial partners for the Artemis program are, number one, will both of the human landing system landers from SpaceX and Blue Origin be ready to be brought into this mission? That's, of course, Starship and Blue Moon Mark II for SpaceX and Blue Origin, respectively. If it's not going to be both of them, and it'll only be one of them, which one? And then what will that interface look like? Will it be a true sort of Apollo 9 style mission where we see NASA astronauts go from the Orion spacecraft into one of the landers and then separate from Orion with the astronauts inside the lander? And will Axiom Space's AX-EMU suits be ready for an on-orbit demonstration? Lots of good questions. Hopefully lots of answers coming in the weeks and months to come. And of course, another big question, who is the crew of Artemis 3? Hopefully we'll get an answer to that one also in the weeks and months to come. Stay tuned. Today's mission on board a Falcon Heavy rocket, the 12th Falcon Heavy to date, is a satellite weighing about 6 tons for the company called Viasat. Appropriately, the satellite's name is also Viasat. The Viasat-3 Flight 3, or F3, is the name of the mission. This is the third and final of these communication satellites that will be launched into a geosynchronous transfer orbit. It'll take about 2 months after separation for the satellite to raise into its operating orbit at the 158.55 degrees east position, where the Viasat-3 F2 satellites is currently serving, or is positioned to serve, the Americas. This particular satellite will be launched in service of the Asia-Pacific region. this mission patch was designed by SpaceX for the mission that we're about to see hopefully launch in about an hour, 45 minutes time. Time now, T minus 1 hour, 41 minutes, 8 seconds, and counting. We'll be, of course, talking about both the payload and the Falcon Heavy rocket throughout the course of the broadcast heading into liftoff. Falcon Heavy rocket with the 3 Falcon boosters has a total of 27 engines among its various first stages. Still just the single Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's upper stage, so that's similar to other Falcon 9 rockets, or the same as other Falcon 9 rockets, actually. You'll note that there is a gray band on the rocket's upper stage, and that is in order to keep the RP-1, the rocket-grade kerosene, warm during an exceedingly long coast phase for this mission. We'll talk about that with a little bit more detail later on, but just as a precursor, note that there's a roughly 4+ hour coast stage for the upper stage between the various burns. Again, we'll talk more about the timeline here in a few minutes. But let's go ahead and give you an animated overview of the satellite that is set to launch today. Again, this is the third and final of the Viasat-3 satellites, the 6-ton vehicles. You can see with the width, with the solar arrays deployed, it's got a tip-to-tip length of 144 feet, uses Ka band for communication. The satellite expected to add about 1 terabit per second of capacity to the Viasat fleet. One of the bigger acquisitions for the company back around the time that we actually talked about the last Viasat-3 satellite to fly on a Falcon Heavy rocket. That was the term of the Viasat Americas mission. That was around the time that the company acquired Inmarsat and added their fleet of satellites to the Viasat family. Note there at the bottom of the graphic, you may have caught it there, the satellite manufactured by Boeing Space. The satellite was delivered to Viasat back in early April. This particular satellite is built on Boeing's 702 MP Plus platform, and the integration work happened at Boeing's El Segundo facility over in California. In just a little bit, you'll hear part of our conversation with David Abrahamian, the Vice President of Space Systems at Viasat. We talk a little bit about the road to F3, the first 2 missions for the Viasat-3 constellation, the challenges they had with the deployment of the antenna on the F1 mission, and how they worked to overcome that with the Viasat Flight 2 spacecraft. F2 is not yet in the loop for service, but F1 is at a lower capability than the company was obviously hoping, given the on-orbit issues that they had with that spacecraft. Time now currently T minus 1 hour 32 minutes 44 seconds in counting. As you might imagine, the countdown timeline for the Falcon Heavy rocket is going to be a little bit different than your typical Falcon 9 vehicle. So let's go ahead and take a beat to talk about some of those key differences and walk you through the milestones that are coming up beginning a little bit more than 30 minutes from now. At around T minus 53 minutes is when the SpaceX launch director will confirm that they are go to proceed into propellant load. Prop load then begins at the T minus 50 minute mark. Again, noting that distinction between a Falcon 9, which starts its fueling timeline at T minus 35 minutes. Also, things are spread out a little bit more with the Falcon Heavy, so this is just first stage RP1 loading beginning on the 3 boosters at the 50-minute mark in time, and then about 5 minutes later, liquid oxygen load will start on the 3 cores as well, or the 3 boosters. Roughly 10 minutes after that, second stage RP1 loading will begin at the T minus 35 minute mark. Second stage LOX load set to begin at T minus 18 minutes and 30 seconds. Expect to see a big vent between those 2 milestones as well, as SpaceX will, of course, need to chill the feed lines prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. T minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 27 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon Heavy rockets gets underway. Like with the Falcon 9, same with the Falcon Heavy essentially, SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen throughout the various plumbing and turbo pumps for the engines. That helps to protect them from thermal shock and damage during startup. At T minus 6 minutes and 30 seconds is when the first stage kerosene load should be complete. Moving right along, T minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the retraction of the strong back away from the Falcon Heavy rocket. First, the clamp arms beneath the payload fairing will open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon Heavy rocket, and it will stay in that position until liftoff. Then at that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon Heavy. Around T minus 3 minutes and 10 seconds is when the side booster liquid oxygen load is complete. Center core will wrap up LOX load at the 3-minute mark. Second stage LOX load, like with a Falcon 9 rocket, will complete at T minus 2 minutes. At that point, the Falcon Heavy will be fully loaded with all of its propellant, reaching flight levels. Just a hair under 1 minute before liftoff, the Falcon Heavy rocket will enter into the final automated startup sequence. The countdown will hand over from the ground sequencer to the onboard flight computers. Like with the Falcon 9 rocket, the SpaceX launch director will confirm that they are in fact go for launch at T minus 45 seconds. The tanks will pressurize for flight 20 seconds before T0. A little bit ahead of Falcon 9 rocket, the engine ignition command is granted at T minus 6 seconds as opposed to 3 seconds for a Falcon 9. And if all goes well, the hold down clamps will release the Falcon Heavy rocket for a T0 departure. Once again, currently targeting the opening of the window at this moment in time. Liftoff at 10:21 a.m. Eastern, 14:21 UTC for those around the world. Just about 1 hour, 28 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. One thing we have not talked about today is the weather. So let's go ahead and address that, as it's always important to make note of where things stand from a meteorological point before a rocket launch, especially one that is as marquee as the return of the Falcon Heavy. SpaceX noted as they approached the 2-hour marker, we're less than 2 hours to the opening of the window, that they were, quote, keeping an eye on the weather ahead of liftoff at 10:21 a.m. Eastern. So teams still targeting the opening of the window for now. We'll, of course, let you know if that does change. As long as SpaceX has not begun propellant load, they do have the latitude to move around a little bit. Coming into this broadcast, into the broadcast, but more importantly into the countdown for SpaceX today, meteorologists with the 45th Weather Squadron did forecast a roughly 30% chance for violating weather, or to put that another way, a 70% chance for acceptable conditions for this launch. Meteorologists looking at the possible violations from the cumulus cloud rule and the surface electric fields rule. This stemming from what they describe as a Carolina low that was, quote, expected to push a weak backdoor cold front through Central Florida early Monday morning. And that the opening of the window was going to hit around the time that a sea breeze was set to develop. So we're looking right now at the latest weather loop from NOAA's GOES East satellite. Fun fact, GOES East, when it was on the ground, was called GOES U, the final of the GOES R series, also launched on one of the most recent Falcon Heavy rockets. That was back in June of 2024, the 10th Falcon Heavy to launch to date. GOES U, after it launched and was taken control of by NOAA, now in operation, or once it entered the fleet, it became GOES 19 during checkouts and is operating as the GOES East satellite. NOAA has a series of the GOES satellites that are positioned over the United States, including GOES West and GOES East, and there's also a GOES that sits right in between those. Make sure they've got a full, complete map of the United States and can provide as accurate as possible weather data from this series of satellites. Of course, not the only ones in the NOAA weather fleet, but some of the most critical ones that the U.S. and its partners depend on. If for whatever reason SpaceX is unable to launch today, the weather tomorrow does look quite a bit better. 90% chance for favorable weather at liftoff. Winds die down a bit as well. For this launch window, meteorologists were tracking between 14 and 22 miles per hour winds. Also looking at some scattered cirrus clouds at the base of about 28,000 feet. That goes away tomorrow. Liftoff winds tomorrow also a little bit lighter, as I just mentioned, trending between 18 down to 10 miles per hour. Of course, no booster recovery weather to concern ourselves with for this mission, given that both of these side boosters are set to return for a landing over at landing zones 2 and landing zone 40. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank the roughly 1,400 of you who are watching along with us this morning. Certainly appreciate you being with us today. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream. Allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Also, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, we did post a new video discussing the history of the Falcon Heavy rocket from its first flight back in 2018 to its 11th and most recent in October of 2024. That was the fully expendable Falcon Heavy supporting the Europa Clipper mission. Europa Clipper, the spacecraft, is set to arrive at that moon around the 2030 timeframe. Also want to thank a few folks for your support with YouTube Super Chats. Our thanks to Super Tech Boy for the $2 Super Chat. Chipping into the Spaceflight Now Caffeine Fund. Always appreciate it. K2 Hat, also with a $2 Super Chat, saying thanks for the coverage and hello from Mico, Florida. Thank you, K2. Also thanks to channel member and moderator Jeff Hansen for the $10 Super Chat. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for helping out in the moderator role. Jeff says, go Kennedy, go SpaceX, go Falcon Heavy, go Viasat, Godspeed, 1072, 1075, 1098. Those are the three tail numbers for the boosters that are flying today's Falcon Heavy mission. Holding on this shot for a minute as we talk just for a second about the boosters. The two side boosters are 1075, which is flying for a 22nd time, and 1072, which is flying for its second time. So from this camera's perspective, 1072 is the booster closest to our camera, and 1098 is in the middle. 1075 is over on the right side of the rocket from this camera's perspective. If you look at the Falcon user's guide, if you want to get really technical about it, if you're facing the rocket and you're looking at the view from the other side of the transporter erector, so where you can see the Viasat logo on one of the payload fairings, from that perspective, the left booster, 1075, is in what's referred to as the PY position. 1072 is in the MY position. Also want to welcome a new channel member, Cheyenne 12100, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Time now, T-minus 1 hour, 15 minutes, 5 seconds, and counting. In the lead up to launch yesterday, we had the opportunity to speak one-on-one with Viasat's David Abrahamian. He's the Vice President of Satellite Systems for Viasat. We talked, of course, about the F3 satellite that is set to launch here in, if all goes well with the weather, 1 hour, 14 minutes, 39 seconds time. And this is the final of 3 planned Viasat-3 satellites that are getting ready to go into operation in GEO. So on the just about 24 hours ago from the liftoff of the Viasat-3 F3 satellite, here is David Abrahamian on the importance of having all 3 satellites in operation together.
There's a lot of significance to it. One is, getting F2 operational over the Americas provides a huge amount of capacity and very flexible capacity for the Americas, which is our home market. Adding F3 to the mix provides that same kind of capacity and flexibility over the APAC region. So we have a number of airline customers in the APAC region that are really anxious to get this capacity online so they can start serving their customers better. One of the two of the hallmarks of the Viasat-3 constellation are a huge amount of just absolute capacity, but also the flexibility to put it wherever you need it, whenever you need it. So it's not like a traditional satellite, like a Viasat-1 or KA-SAT or, most of the Inmarsat fleet, where you've got a single feed per beam, beam locations are fixed, spectrum allocations are fixed, and you might overload one beam and a beam over here doesn't have anybody in it, and you can't move that capacity. The Viasat-3 system, because we're using a phased array technology in our antennas on board, and we can form a beam wherever we need it. We can allocate spectrum to it as we need it. We can put multiple beams in an area as needed. So we really don't have the issue of trapped capacity here. So it's a matter of following the demand wherever it is within that spacecraft's field of view.
And of course, and our thanks again to Dave and the Viasat team for their time yesterday. You'll be hearing more from them as the broadcast goes on. Time now currently T-minus 1 hour, 10 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. Today's flight of a Falcon Heavy rocket set to be SpaceX's 51st mission of the year using its Falcon family of vehicles. This is following a successful flight of their Falcon 9 rocket from Vandenberg Space Force Base yesterday morning. Our thanks to our editor, Stephen Young, for running commentary and the technical operations of that broadcast simultaneously yesterday, as the clip you just saw from the interview was being conducted simultaneously to the Falcon 9 rocket launch. So quite a bit to juggle with this mission and other things going on in commercial space flights. So gotta delegate sometimes and can't be commentating for every single broadcast. So appreciate Stephen for covering that one. After this launch, it will go back to being fairly quiet here at Launch Complex 39A. The plan for SpaceX, as discussed and noted by one of their members of leadership, Kiko Donchev, on X, is that the pad is set to be put in reserve pretty much primarily for work on the Starship Super Heavy vehicle, which is happening adjacent to the pad where Falcon Heavy is currently, and to hold this in reserve for Falcon Heavy rockets instead of converting back and forth between Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. You can see a little bit of venting actually coming now from the strong back there as SpaceX does some early work to chill the lines prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket. It's been a while since we've seen a launch from this pad, but this is typically around the time that we expect to start seeing that little trickle of vent. Usually about 1 hour and change out from the opening of a window. One of the times that we will actually see a Falcon 9 rocket launch from here, or at least that is our expectation, is the upcoming launch of Intuitive Machines' IM-3 mission, which will use their Nova C lander, which requires fueling at the pad, currently only capable for SpaceX at Launch Complex 39A. Last week, SpaceX also removed, well, they had removed the crew access arm from the tower there at the pad some time ago now, but just recently relocated it from its resting place at the launch complex over to presumably the Hangar X facility along Roberts Road here at the Kennedy Space Center. with the lighting this morning really starting to pick up on some of the venting from the ground systems there. As the vent from the transporter erector also continues, we're approaching the final planned hour before liftoff, or at minimum the opening of the 85-minute launch window for the Falcon Heavy rocket. Actually, want to correct an earlier statement that I made. It is not a vent that we're seeing. That actually appears to be smoke. You can actually see a little bit of the orange flame there to the bottom left of the launch tower. This this smoke that we're seeing in the flame might be in the area where they burn off some of the T-tab, the igniter fluid used for the Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy Merlin engines. We are currently 1 hour and counting to the planned launch of SpaceX's 12th Falcon Heavy rocket to date. Countdown progressing towards the opening of a roughly 85-minute window for SpaceX to launch the Viasat-3 Flight 3 satellite, a 6-ton vehicle built by Boeing on behalf of Viasat, the third and final of the trio of satellites. SpaceX notes that teams are continuing to monitor the weather, which unfortunately sounds like it is deteriorating. They say it's now currently 55% favorable for liftoff, down from 70% when the forecast was issued yesterday. Still tracking and keeping our eye on the smoke near the pad of that fire that's burning in the area where we'll sometimes see post liftoff a little bit of fire in the area where the T-tab igniter is. Apologies for the wind shake. We're seeing if we can do something about that, but might just have to live with it, unfortunately. But you can just make out the little glow of the orange flames near visually from this perspective. There's obviously some depth difference between where the flame is and where the water tower is, but as far as position in this frame, it's if you go near the top of the water tower and then go straight down to the bottom of the frame, you can just make out those orange flames there. Unclear if this will be any kind of impact to the launch opportunity today. It has so far not been mentioned by SpaceX in either their T-minus 2 hours or T-minus 1 hour tweet that just came out moments ago. Currently just about 4.5 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load today. If the go-ahead is given, fueling will start at T-minus 15 minutes with loading of RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene on board the 3 boosters for the Falcon Heavy. About 5 minutes after that, liquid oxygen load will begin, and then 10 minutes after that will be the beginning of second stage RP-1 loading, which of course in comparison to the Falcon 9 rocket tanking timeline, fueling of that vehicle begins at the 35-minute mark, so a little bit longer of a lead time for the Falcon Heavy. Understandable given that this is 3 Falcon boosters wrapped up in one. As we are within the final hour prior to liftoff, the Brevard County Emergency Operations Center has also activated. This is a team of people representing both the county and federal governments, as well as some state actors and members of the SpaceX team that act in coordination over at the Emergency Operations Center in the unlikely event that there were to be some sort of significant anomaly with the Falcon Heavy rocket. This would be the team that would help respond to it and coordinate any type of emergency operations, hence the name of the center. One of the busiest EOCs in the country is the one here in Brevard County, Florida's Space Coast, because of all the spaceflight activities that happen here, both launches as well as things like static fires. Starting to see some folks line up on the water as well, looking from a camera from our friend Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions. Folks staking out their spot along the Banana River to catch a glimpse of the Falcon Heavy rocket once it takes flight in hopefully about 55 minutes' time. We'll know where we stand in roughly 2 minutes or so. That's when the SpaceX launch director is set to make the call on prop load. Again, for folks who are just joining us, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the 12th Falcon Heavy rocket launch to date. This is also the second time that a Falcon Heavy is set to fly a Viasat-3 satellite. Unlike back in 2023 when they launched the Viasat-3 Americas mission, this will not be an expendable Falcon Heavy, but instead will see the two side boosters return for a touchdown as planned at landing zones 40 and land end 2. Currently T-minus 52 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. At this point, assuming liftoff on time, the SpaceX launch director should have made the call on the start of prop load. We're standing by for further updates from SpaceX and to see if in fact that is the case. Once tanking begins, that is set to kick off at the T-minus 50-minute mark with the loading of first stage RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene, across the 3 boosters. Less than 1 minute now to the start of expected fueling beginning. T minus 50 seconds and counting, or 50 minutes and counting. 50 minutes on the clock. The SpaceX clock appears to still be ticking down at this point in time, so presumably prop load has now begun. We'll, of course, await any further updates from SpaceX and look for the signs of fueling, which will be a little bit more staggered with this mission given the spread of prop load for this flight. Unlike with a Falcon 9 rocket where both RP-1 and liquid oxygen start to flow on board a Falcon 9 booster simultaneously, for a Falcon Heavy rocket, RP-1 load began, we suspect, just about 1 minute ago, and first stage liquid oxygen load is slated to begin at T minus 45 minutes. So it'll be a few minutes after that before we can really clearly see the frost line form on the booster and get a good visual confirmation that prop load is in fact underway. Of course, we'll also let you know if SpaceX confirms prop load has begun as well. For those who did miss the reference to the weather earlier in our broadcast, coming into this launch opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast a 70% chance for favorable conditions. That was yesterday. Today, with an hour left on the clock, SpaceX noted that the weather conditions deteriorated to 55% favorable for liftoff. Still better than a coin toss, but not trending in the direction that we, or certainly SpaceX, would ideally like to see. Time now T minus 46 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. Seeing considerably less smoke in the area that we were before, which hopefully is a good sign. 46 minutes on the clock now, less than 1 minute remaining until the planned start of liquid oxygen load on board the 3 Falcon Heavy boosters. Now T-minus 45 minutes and counting. At this point, assuming all is progressing as expected, SpaceX should be just starting to load liquid oxygen on board the 3 Falcon boosters that make up the Heavy. In the next few minutes, of course, it's a little bit difficult with this lighting, but we hopefully will be able to start discerning that the LOX is in fact flowing on board the rocket. Start to see a bit of a frost line form along at least the closest booster to our camera. Again, it's still a little bit hazy out that direction, and the lighting isn't doing us any favors. We will do our level best to give you a visual confirmation that prop load is underway. Can't tell that from the RP1 since it doesn't generate the same type of frost line. We need the LOX for that. As we're awaiting that milestone, want to give a shout out to our team here and afar. Our editor, Stephen Young, running the technical operations of today's broadcast. Lots to juggle on that front. Our photographers, John, Adam, and Michael, are scattered about getting ready to track and otherwise image the Falcon Heavy rocket once it does take flight. And our friends Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck and Jen Briggs also standing by for tracking. As a reminder, unlike all the other Falcon Heavy rockets that had boosters return for a landing, this will be the first time that the boosters will have a really explicit divergence in flight paths as they make their way back to Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. One will head over to landing zone 40 over at Space Launch Complex 40. That's the box on the left-hand side of your screen. Meanwhile, the other booster will head to landing zone 2, as we've seen with previous Falcon Heavy launches. SpaceX no longer has their lease at landing zone number 1, as that pad, along with eventually landing zone 2, will be converted for use by a pair of launch providers, Viasat and Phantom Space. They will jointly be using formerly Slick 13. Launch Complex 14 is occupied by Stoke Space. And we're just now starting to see a little bit of vapor near the base of the closest Falcon Heavy booster. Good visual indication that prop load is in fact underway, seeing that LOX flow. And you can just barely make out a little bit of vapor near the top of those boosters. We were seeing the venting earlier, more than an hour prior to liftoff. That's coming from the strongback as well. If you're just joining us, we are just a hair under 39 minutes away from the planned liftoff of SpaceX's Falcon Heavy rocket. At this point in the count, SpaceX has begun loading RP-1 and liquid oxygen on board the 3 Falcon boosters that make up the Heavy. Coming up next in about 3.5 minutes at the T-minus 35-minute mark is when second stage RP-1 loading will begin. Liquid oxygen load on the Falcon Heavy second stage will then start at the T-minus 18 minutes 30-second point in the countdown. Taking a quick look at our live chat here, I want to thank the more than 3,500 of you who are joining along with us today. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream to allow us more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. I mentioned earlier in the broadcast our moderators, Jeff Hansen, M. Teresa, holding it down for us in the chat. I also want to thank channel member Cumulus Granatus for helping to answer folks' questions in the chat space as well. And a big thanks to our channel member community writ large that make this and every other live launch opportunity possible here at Spaceflight Now. Speaking of some of those channel members, Michael McGrory has been a member with us for 27 months now at the spacecraft commander level. Michael says, it's been a historic 27 months. Very true. Can't wait to see what we'll be seeing launched during the next 27 months on Spaceflight Now. Thanks to the whole team for your comprehensive coverage. For the kind words, Michael. Also, thanks to K2 Hat for a $2 super chat. Saying, hope the rain holds off. That is northeast, as do we. Michael McGrory following up with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate the support at that level again. And to Beverly Knuckles, another channel member who's been with us now for 22 months at the mission specialist level, who says, good morning from the British Virgin Islands. Good morning to you as well. And we certainly appreciate all of our channel members. A big thank you to those of you who are able to support us at those higher levels so that we can continue to bring the coverage you expect, both of live launches as well as on-the-ground reporting, and to keep our entry-level price as it is right now. As we mentioned, there's a lot happening in spaceflight these days. Right now, you're taking a live look at NASA's Pegasus barge, which is hanging out just a little bit down the river from us here. Coming through the lock right now, actually, as we speak. This is containing NASA's Space Launch System rocket core stage number 3, set to support the Artemis 3 mission. Stacking of the rocket is expected to begin over the course of this summer. Of course, earlier this month, we saw the mobile launcher number 1 leave the launch pad at Launch Complex 39B and begin to make its way into the vehicle assembly building. It started its rollback on April 16th and completed rolling on into the VAB the morning of April 17th. Meanwhile, a couple of the solid rocket booster segments from Northrop Grumman have also arrived here in Florida and are starting to go through some of their pre-stacking integration and checkouts in a facility not too far away from the VAB here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. The barge that you're seeing here on your screen, we're expecting to arrive at the port, or at the dock here on the turn basin shortly after the liftoff of the Falcon Heavy rocket. Of course, we'll continue to track that as it makes its way towards us, and if it does happen to reach here after launch coverage is wrapped up, you can check that out in our 24/7 live stream, Launchpad Live. Given the timeline of this mission, though, we are anticipating that we'll be on the air for quite some time, given that the Viasat-3 F3 satellite is set to be deployed from the Falcon Heavy second stage nearly 5 hours post liftoff. And assuming SpaceX stays with their coverage, we will follow suit. Time now, you can see we're at T-minus 33 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. Just a couple minutes into the start of second stage RP1 loading getting underway. The final bit of fueling that has yet to begin will be second stage LOX load, which should start at around T-minus 18 minutes and 30 seconds. Seeing some more movement from the barge there, as it looks like it's progressing nicely through the lock. Again, on board the Pegasus barge is roughly 4/5 of the SLS core stage. The engine section was actually delivered back when the core stage for the Artemis 2 mission arrived back in the summer of 2024. So that has been here at the Kennedy Space Center for some time. The 4 RS-25 engines that will power the core stage are not quite yet here, but those will be brought up from the Aerojet Rocketdyne facilities, now part of L3 Harris Technologies. Those will come up from the West Palm Beach area later this year once they're ready for integration. Coming up on 30 minutes ahead of the liftoff of the Falcon Heavy rocket. Got a nice little pop of vent from the transporter erector there. Should see the big vent beginning ahead of upper stage liquid oxygen load, which is set to begin at the T-minus 18 minute 30 second mark. Seeing quite a bit of vapor there from the 3 Falcon boosters that make up the Heavy as the super cold densified liquid oxygen continues to load up on the various first stages. Time now, T-minus 26 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. Starting to pick up a light smattering of rain here at the Kennedy Space Center press site. As noted by SpaceX, and we remarked earlier in the broadcast, teams are tracking roughly 55% chance for acceptable weather for liftoff today. SpaceX sounds like they are assuming the best weather outlook will be at the opening of the window, so pressing forward with their plans for liftoff here in 25 minutes and 40 seconds at the opening of the 85-minute window. 10:21 a.m. Eastern, 14:21 UTC is the planned departure time for the Falcon Heavy. Taking a look from one of our trackers to the south, you can see how the haze is starting to build in here as the rain begins to fall at the press site. Much clearer down on Merritt Island, closer to where Adam is, but taking a wider look back out here at KSC. The photographers grabbing umbrellas, some of them standing just boldly with floppy hats on. John Pisani has been moving quickly to make sure that our cameras are protected from the rainfall here. And as you can see, the big vent is just now beginning here at Launch Complex 39A as SpaceX prepares to load liquid oxygen on board the Falcon Heavy upper stage. This vent should last about 4 minutes in duration, setting the stage for upper stage lock, so to begin at T-minus 18 minutes and 30 seconds. Time now T-minus 18 minutes and counting. The big vent has concluded. Second stage LOX load is set to begin, or is now underway. Couple things to put on your or in your plates, dear viewers who are watching this broadcast, if you're watching this live, of course. Following liftoff, we'll be working to get launch replays into work, so be sure to stick around for those, as we're capturing this mission from quite a few vantage points. Also, this is not the only launch that is happening today from Florida's Space Coast. There is also an Atlas V rocket set to launch from Space Launch Complex 41 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. That mission set to lift off during a window that opens up at 8:52 p.m. Eastern, 0052 UTC for those joining around the world. We'll have live coverage of that beginning about an hour prior to liftoff and talk much more about that mission explicitly. In between the launch and hopefully good booster landings of the Falcon Heavy rocket as well, we're also keeping our eyes peeled for NASA's Pegasus barge as it cruises on into the turn basin here at the KSC press site. So lots to stick around for as you're watching coverage here at Spaceflight Now, and we certainly appreciate the more than 6,300 of you who are joining us today. Starting to get pad level views now from SpaceX here as we're just under 15 minutes remaining before liftoff. You can see the Viasat logo on the payload fairing. This will be the second Viasat-3 satellite launched by SpaceX and its Falcon Heavy rockets. The middle of the constellation, Viasat-3 F3, was launched by United Launch Alliance and its Atlas V rocket. It's still going through its final checkouts before it's planned to enter service here in the weeks to come. As we're just about 13 minutes away from the liftoff of the Falcon Heavy rocket with, again, the third and final of the Viasat-3 satellites Lots of lessons have been learned from the first two satellites that launched, so want to go now to part of our conversation that we had yesterday with Viasat's David Abrahamian, the Vice President of Satellite Systems, to talk about some of those lessons learned.
Well, it was a huge process, as you can imagine, to figure out what went wrong with F1, apply the appropriate lessons learned, but also, make the appropriate changes to ensure a successful F2. We've learned a lot. I think, my hair was less gray at the time, and I had more of it. But, it's the kind of thing that you go through periodically. Nothing is perfect, and you have to make the best of it. And, so far, so good.
And what were some of the key changes that you wanted to make sure that F2 didn't replicate for F1?
Well, we can't get too much into the details on that, but at the same time, there is a huge emphasis on modeling what actually happened with F1, understanding what happened there, and then making some improvements both to the structure of the reflector on F2, as well as how it actually deploys.
And our thanks again to David Abrahamian and the Viasat team for their time yesterday. Currently T-minus 11 minutes, 32 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of the Falcon Heavy rocket. Coming up next, the next major milestone is the chill of the 27 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon Heavy boosters. That involves SpaceX flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbopumps to help protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. About 30 seconds after that, first stage kerosene loading will be complete. Then the strong back retraction sequence will start at the T-minus 4 minute 30 second mark. Just under 10 minutes remaining before the planned liftoff of the Falcon Heavy rocket. SpaceX noted when they began their broadcast, they are currently tracking no issues at this point in the count, weather remaining 55% favorable for liftoff. Center core RP1 loading has wrapped up.
Has started.
Call for engine chill on the Falcon Heavy 27 Merlin engines at the base of those 3 boosters. Coming up in now about 10 seconds, we should hear a call for the first stage kerosene load being complete on the 2 side boosters.
NY RP1 load complete.
Yeah.
That call on the MY side booster prop load being complete, that is B1072, making its 2nd flight today. Just under 6 minutes remaining in the count. Coming up next will be the retraction of the strong back as the clamp arms beneath the payload fairings will open up. And then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon Heavy rocket. Here's the flight overview for the 2 side boosters. Can be 1075, making its 22nd flight, the other for its 2nd flight. You're taking a look at the 2 landing zones where the boosters will be headed. Pressurization for strong back retraction getting underway. Those clamp arms that you see beneath the payload fairings will open on up and allow the strong back to recline away from the Falcon Heavy upper stage. For those who were not with us earlier in the broadcast, you'll note that there is the gray thermal protective band along the Falcon Heavy upper stage. That is in order to keep the RP-1 on the upper stage from freezing during an especially long coast phase. There goes one of those clamp arms. 4 minutes and counting. The next major milestone, we should be getting confirmation that the side boosters liquid oxygen load is complete. As you see that band of clouds that just running diagonal. Confirmation that the MY booster 1072 is complete with LOX load. Should be hearing calls for the PY B1075 LOX load being complete as well.
LOX load complete.
Confirmation that B1075 is complete on the other booster. Center core LOX load should wrap up at around the T-3 minute mark. Coming up in about 10 seconds.
LOX load complete.
Call for center core LOX load is complete. The Falcon Heavy rocket is now fully loaded with the liquid oxygen and RP-1 on the boosters. Upper stage liquid oxygen load set to wrap up in about 20 seconds time. At that point, the Falcon Heavy will be completely at flight levels.
LOX load complete.
Good call there. The Falcon Heavy is loaded up with all of its locks and fuel. Got about 3 million pounds of propellant on board this vehicle. Coming up in roughly 30 seconds at about T-minus 1 minute will be when the Falcon Heavy enters into its automated startup. Just now beginning to see the ground gas closeouts.
We're now standing by.
Falcon Heavy is in startup.
With that call, we are awaiting the SpaceX launch director to confirm that they are in fact go for launch. Let's listen in. Did not hear a go for launch call, standing by. Might be a scrub for the weather, waiting to hear more.
Hold, hold, hold. Hold, hold, hold.
And we have
Launch
a scrub.
abort is running.
Because SpaceX
As you just heard,
uses a densified form of liquid oxygen, they do not have the opportunity to hold the launch. Therefore, the mission has scrubbed for today. A 24-hour backup opportunity is available to SpaceX, looking for the liftoff of the Falcon Heavy now as early as tomorrow morning, no earlier than 10:17 a.m. Eastern. We'll see if we get more from SpaceX regarding the abort that was just called, likely for the weather, but let's listen in to see if we can hear anything more.
As you heard on the nets, it looks like we will be standing down from today's launch attempt due to weather. The vehicle and payloads remain in good health, and our next launch opportunity is tomorrow at 10:17 a.m. Eastern Time. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we hope.
And as you just heard, of course, because SpaceX uses super cold densified liquid oxygen, once it starts fueling, if there is any issue, which was the case with the weather today, a scrub was called, and now they are targeting their next available launch opportunity, which is another 85-minute window that is set to open no earlier than 10:17 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, April 28th. We'll, of course, be back with you for live coverage of the Falcon Heavy, but as we've been mentioning throughout the course of the broadcast, there are still a couple of important milestones out ahead of us here today, here at the Kennedy Space Center. We are awaiting the arrival of NASA's Pegasus barge, which is carrying the core stage for the Space Launch System rocket that will be used in the Artemis 3 mission. And then later tonight at 8:52 p.m. Eastern, 0052 UTC, United Launch Alliance's Atlas V is set to take flight, carrying a batch of 29 Amazon LEO satellites up into low Earth orbit. We will have live coverage of that mission beginning about an hour prior to liftoff, and thankfully for that mission, weather looking notably better than the launch weather here for the Falcon Heavy. Meteorologists forecasting an 85% chance for good weather tonight with the Atlas launch. You're looking right now live at the Pegasus barge as it makes its way here to the turn basin at the KSC press site. We'll continue to track the Pegasus barge over on our 24/7 live stream called Launchpad Live. So we hope you're able to stick around for that, pop in and out as you grab some lunch this afternoon. I know it's still early, but for those of you taking an early lunch or just want some rocket-related viewing for the latter part of your morning, we'll have that available for you again on our 24/7 live stream, Launchpad Live. Want to thank our team who has been standing by in support of the hopeful Falcon Heavy launch, which unfortunately did not pan out today. Thanks to Adam, John, and Michael, as well as to our friends Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Also want to thank our moderators in the chat who have been helping us out today. Big thanks to M. Teresa, Jeff Hansen, and to channel member Cumulus Granatus for helping to answer folks' questions in the chat. Thanks as well to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's been running the technical operations of the broadcast. Most importantly, though, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. We certainly appreciate your time and attention and look forward to welcoming you back here tonight as we cover United Launch Alliance's United Launch Alliance's Atlas V rocket, set to lift off from Space Launch Complex 41 no earlier than 8:52 p.m. Eastern tonight. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.